Losing my best friend at age 19. I've been meaning to talk about this for a while. Uh, Something that I really just needed to tell the story of officially, because it's something that I've made a lot of music about. It's something that I've talked about on other platforms, and I've never really sat down to sort of dig into everything, really just go into how it all played out and the impact it's left on my life. It's one of the most life changing experiences I've ever had in so many ways. We'll take it all the way back to, I guess this would be 2009, I want to say. 2009 sounds about right. This is when I met Elijah. This is when I met my brother. This is when I met my best friend. First grade, you know. Mrs. Watson's class. Shout out Mrs. Watson. This is when we met, and this is when we formed the brotherhood that we'll forever share. It's crazy, like thinking about it now. Just how it all like went down and took place. I don't even really remember how we became friends. How we even like met. Like it was just one of those things. I think life just always has a way of bringing people together, and with him and I, it was no different. And right off the bat, it's my brother, best friend, inseparable, getting in trouble together in class, getting our cards flipped. Being in class, getting your card flipped because you're talking too much and you just want to always be around each other, hang out. That was us, you know. Friendship, it was just like none other. Truly the type of friendship where it doesn't matter how long you go without seeing that person, or how long it is maybe since you've been around each other. It's like the minute that you're back together, you pick up right where you left off. It's always been like that with him and I. And so, first grade, that's where it all began, that classroom. And then outside the classroom, I'd go and I'd sleep over at his house and he would sleep over at mine, and spent a lot of time together. We loved wrestling. That was our thing. WWE was our big connection. I remember growing up I was a fanatic and he was a fanatic, and so when we came together, it was time to roughhouse. I remember we were on his bed in his old room at his mom's, and I remember picking him up and doing I don't know if I did an attitude adjustment on him or something, where I just, body slammed him on his bed, and the bed boards underneath are wooden, and they snapped and they broke. And I remember his bed just collapsed and slanted down. We just slid off of it because we were really that into it. We were obsessed, to say the least. We both were so head over heels about wrestling. That was our entire, everything. So many good memories. I remember being over his house, sleeping over one night, watching Zombieland in the living room. I remember sleeping over there and having to be careful because if you went to bed too early, you'd get a wet willy in your ear. This was what was going on at my brother's house. And it's just so funny because after first grade, him and I didn't ever get another class together all the way up until I think literally high school. And even in high school, I don't even feel like we had classes like that together. I feel like we were always separated for some reason when it came to school ever since first grade. I think it's because in first grade we were so attached and we were so glued at the hip that they had to separate us. It was like they had to. Otherwise, we would have just, been menaces together. But it's so crazy because, like, my brother growing up, a lot of the times he wouldn't even be allowed to come outside the house. He wouldn't even be allowed to, hang out a lot of the times, whether it was because of grades or his parents were just extra, strict and didn't want him to go out, or, whatever, wanted to be safe, whatever the case was, he wasn't always allowed to go out. So there'd be long periods where I wouldn't see him. And like I said, we didn't really have classes after first grade. But somehow, some way, our connection just never dissolved. It didn't matter how much time was between the last time we would hang out or see each other or whatever. It was like, it was always just so natural. And it was a mutual understanding. It was a type of connection where you don't really have to say too much. That was, I think, something that I'll forever cherish about him and I is it's like, those are the best connections where you don't have to say anything. The type where you can just sit in silence with that person and allow yourself to just occupy the space together, and that's enough, right? That's the best. Where you don't gotta say or do or be anything other than just, exactly who you are in that moment. And be appreciated for that. My brother, he was one of the few people I've ever met to this day who wholeheartedly supported me in every way, shape, and form. Even if it was something he didn't understand at first, this was always the case, as he would always just at least try. And he would always back me no matter what, when it came to music, when it came to just, fashion, or how we dressed, or how we approached life, or our viewpoints, our perspectives, whatever. It was like both of us we had that mutual understanding that no matter what we chose to do, we were going to support one another and lift each other up in doing it. And I love that so much about him and I. It's rare, right? It's rare that you meet people like that in life, because a lot of times people are, a lot of times people have their own feelings about somebody who is clearly passionate about something, or has an interest in something, or, takes a liking to something unique or special. And with him, I never had to even worry if he was ever gonna question that or judge that, criticize that. He was always in my corner, and I was always in his, up until the day he died, And it's crazy because, in high school, I feel like is where we really started connecting more than we had in, honestly, a lot of years. For a while in middle school, it's not that our connection ever dwindled. It's just we didn't really see one another a lot. I'm telling y'all, this is some crazy stuff because, from day one, this is my brother. But it's we would go so long without being around each other and seeing each other. So when it came to high school, I feel like he started to gain a lot more independence. Like I said, a lot of this was due to his family not wanting him to be out, not wanting him to, be anywhere that he maybe shouldn't be, or whatever the case may be, whatever their reasons were. A lot of it was just his family holding him back from being able to get out and hang out with, the rest of us. A lot of the times he would just be at the crib, he'd just be chilling, doing his thing, playing the game, kicking it, hanging out with his fam, whatever. But high school was where he gained a lot more independence, and I feel like he was able to hang out a lot more, and that's when we started skating together. The friend group that we were in at the time, we would all go and skateboard and ride around, and that was one of the most fun things that I've ever experienced to this day. To this day, by far, skating around with your friends, it's a feeling like none other. Just spending days where you're outside all day, all the way into the night, hanging out, skateboarding, listening to music, chilling, smoking, whatever. just enjoying life, being outside. It's a beautiful feeling. And this is how it was for us for a while. This was after my first relationship had ended. I feel like this is when that era of my life took place. My first relationship, when my first love was, you know, my sophomore year, then into my junior and senior year, partly. So after that ended, which was in like 2020, him and I feel like we really were able to like reconnect more. I was really invested in that relationship when it was occurring, so I wasn't even hanging out with like as many of my friends that I grew up with. I had some close friends at the time that I was still very like tight with and that I would hang out with a ton, but the friends I grew up with, so like him and a few other guys, you know, we hadn't hung out nearly as much. But after that relationship ended, it was like when I reconnected, I feel like, with all of those friends of mine that I grew up with and that I was really close to earlier on, you know, elementary school, middle school, things like that. And then you know, that summer, you know, after we graduated, you know, the summer that followed that, that was a beautiful time. I was very hopeful for the future because I had got accepted to Parsons School of Design in New York, and I was like stoked to go and just be out there and have this new chapter and this fresh start, and you know, to be away from home officially for like the first time ever on my own, moving to New York at 18. It's crazy. And prepping for that and knowing that that was what was ahead was also crazy because it made me cherish those times that I had with my brother that much more. So anytime we would hang out that summer, because we hung out a lot, that summer was probably where we hung out the most. We would do just pretty much anything and everything. You know, go to parties, skateboard, smoke together, do music, shoot music videos together. Like, we were always just doing something and always just having fun. I always pick them up in my Blazer. I always pick them up in the Blazer, and we would just go. I remember we drove out to like Grand Rapids one day, and we met up with one of my homies who I was in a music collective with, and we just drove, and we, you know, couple hour drive, and eventually got there, made music, chilled, and then eventually, like later that night, we drove home, went to a party. Like, this was just the type of stuff we would be doing on random days in the summer. Beautiful. You know, I miss those days. Those days were some of the best of my life. To this point, even to this point where I'm at now, in my early 20s, it's like, those are still some of the best memories I've ever made. Those are simple moments to some, but for me, it's everything. And just being with my brother was everything, you know. It means the world to me. And the time we spent together was just so precious because I think it was also because of the fact that we had such limited time together in a lot of ways. Being that he wasn't always able to come out and hang out, when we did get together, it made it that much more special. You know, that distance created, you know, such a strong bond and such a deep chemistry that even to this day with friends in my life now, it's just it's never going to be like that, you know. And it's not supposed to be, right? That's its own friendship, that's its own brotherhood. Everyone comes into your life for a reason and at the time they need to, but you know, with him it's eternal, right? That connection is forever. And you know, kind of getting into what led up to him passing away and what led to him dying at age 19. This was in 2022 when he officially passed away. August 6, 2022 was when my brother, Elijah Craig Steward, died and passed away. That summer was crazy because I had just gotten back from my freshman year, from finishing my freshman year at Parsons, at the new school. So I was home for the summer. I'd be going back, obviously, to New York in the fall, but I was at home, and I was trying to save a lot of money, so I was working like 2 jobs at the time, trying to save as much as I could. I was working at a clothing boutique called Mature in Detroit, and then I was working at Little Caesars and doing both of those. I'd been working at Little Caesars. I would, work there in high school and stuff, and one of my homies, his family owned the place, so it was cool because anytime I came home in the summer, I could just go and work there whenever I really wanted. And so I was working there. I was working at the boutique. I was really busy. That summer I was really busy, working a lot. I worked almost every day, honestly, and I was working, these 2 jobs. On top of that, I had entered into a new relationship when I was in New York in that spring semester of freshman year. I had just gotten into a relationship in like April, when I met my now ex-girlfriend. We started, going out around that time of the spring semester, and so I was very invested into that, obviously, because it was very new, it was very fresh. We had met in New York, and then the semester ended in like May, so we only got so much time together before we both had to go back home. And she wasn't from Michigan, she's from Maryland, so long distance was kind of, that was our only option. So that summer, a lot of it was just consumed with trying to find time to talk with her and connect with her, being long distance, and then also going back and forth. She would come to Michigan and visit. She had came for a trip to visit me and my family, and she stayed with us. And then I went there and visited her family and stayed with them. And so like we would go back and forth to see one another that summer too. So I was busy with a lot. I was juggling a lot, relationship, working, and then also just trying to, spend time with my family for like the little time I was there. People that I, hadn't seen in a while, friends. And of course, one of the first people I hit up when I got back was my brother. And so we got together pretty early as to when I got back. I don't remember the exact month, but it wasn't too long after I got back from New York. I had pulled up to his mom's house and we went into the whip. I had a new bong, so we smoked, and it was awesome. I'm glad I got to have that experience with him, because this was the second to last time I would see him alive. I didn't know it at the time, even though part of me knew something was up, and I'll explain that more as I go deeper into this, but I knew something was up. I didn't really know what, but when I went there and when we, went into my car to smoke, I could just tell something was different, and like something was off with him. He just had a different energy than I remembered, last time we had hung out, which was probably over like a break when I came back, over like a winter break or something from school. His energy was just different. It was just not what I remember it to be. And it wasn't that long of a period of time, And it was something about his eyes. His eyes were really different. And I remember almost being kind of startled by them in a lot of ways. When you look at a person that you love and they don't even have that same look in their eyes, it's pretty scary because it makes you wonder like what that person is going through. And, we were talking and chopping it up and just catching up, and eventually, like, the conversation, it led into just that. And it was kind of like a situation where he had asked me, if I had dabbled, if I had gotten into any drugs or anything that was, stronger than just like weed. We both love smoking weed, and that was like always our thing. He would always roll up in my car and we'd smoke together. That was always our thing, and that was always my thing, weed and mushrooms, and that's really it. I was never a drinker, and he knew that too. He drank way more than I did. He drank way more than me, but that was our thing. We always loved to smoke together. And so when he asked me kind of like that question about other things, like harder stuff, I was a little taken back because I didn't really know what to make of it. But again, it almost wasn't a surprise because I could tell something about him was different. I just knew. I just knew something about him was had changed and was different. And so, I told him like, nah, I'm good on all that. I don't do any of that. It's I've seen addiction up close and just like what it does and how it destroys people. And told him, I let him know that I'm not on that. And so for him though, he started explaining to me, how he was starting to mess with the pills. He was starting to mess with the pills, and he was starting to get into the pills. And when you hear your best friend, your brother that you've known your whole life start talking about stuff like that, a lot of different feelings I feel like came up. We're sitting there, we're high, we're chilling, goofy, but then stuff like that gets brought up, and it's a little bit more serious now. I remember him. He just started describing to me how it felt for him when he would be on the pills, when he would try them and when he would do them and stuff. And the way he expressed it, it was almost like you could just tell that there was something deeper that he was trying to escape from, or not feel, or not face, or confront. As anyone who turns to drugs is really trying to do. Even if at first it's just out of curiosity, it always ends up being an escape. The harder ones especially. And so it worried me a lot. It worried me for him, and he knew I wasn't about that. He knew I wasn't on that. I let him know that, but he already knew that just from knowing me. But it worried me. It worried me a lot for him because I could just tell he was starting to go down a path that I knew could lead a lot of different ways. But also at the same time, I've been around a lot. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of stuff to where it's like some people genuinely do just kind of dabble with those things and then put them to the side. Some people, they don't really get hooked on them. So I didn't really make it too big of a deal, and I didn't really press him or anything like that, or try to convince him otherwise. It was more one of those things where if that's what he was choosing to do at the time, that's what he was choosing to do. Looking back on it now, part of me wishes I would have been more I don't want to say like firm about it with him, kind of like where I stood, but I definitely didn't do anything as far as try to convince him like otherwise. If that's what he was trying to do, that's what he was trying to do. And for me, it was going back to like just the support that him and I had always given one another, where I always trusted his judgment. I didn't ever question him or like question his decisions, because I always knew he'd be good. At least I thought. At least at the time, I'm thinking like he's gonna be good. He's not nothing to worry about. He might be trying some stuff, but again, I was around so many people and around so much stuff where that wasn't uncommon. It wasn't like a shock, especially at back in 2022. Like, not a surprise if people were just trying these things, dabbling these things, trying to see what they feel like, whatever. I had a lot of people around me, and I'd been around a lot of people who did a lot of different shit. But I had never had a friend who had ever gone into that deeply to where it was like a really concerning thing. But maybe I should have been a little bit more concerned, because obviously, as we know now, he ended up dying, and it wasn't because of the pills. It wasn't because of drugs. He was shot. He was murdered. But I think that was kind of like the point. I remember telling my ex-girlfriend at the time later that night when we had got on the phone together. I remember telling her like, I'm worried about him. Like something's different. I could just see it in him. I could see it on his face. I could just his body language, everything is just different. He started also telling me too in that car how he was thinking about going to the Marines, which was a big surprise because I had never we had never talked about that. That was never like a vision that he had back in high school or middle school, elementary, ever. He was never, it was never something he wanted for himself. So when he threw that out there, it kind of threw me off because it's like, you know, this, to me, my brother, he's, you know, he's creative, he's artistic. He loved fashion, he loved music, he loved just the culture in general. He was more about that. Like the flyest guy I've ever met. So when he hit me with that, it was kind of, it was a little tough to like, it was a tough pivot. At first I was a little thrown off and kind of like, what? Like, you want to go to the Marines? Like, since when? His excuse, he said he wanted to serve his country. And I said, hey, I'm going to support you in that. If you want to do that, cool. But it just, you know, just stuff that he was saying and stuff that he was talking about was just not like him. That's what I'm saying. It was just not like him. Stuff that he was just saying was just different. And I could tell too, just by like the way he was interacting, it's like he like wasn't there anymore. He like wasn't there in the ways that I remember him being there. Like, I don't know what happened from the time that I left for school to when we hung out that day. I don't know. But I remember telling my ex at the time, I was like, it's just something. I'm worried something's wrong, something's different. And it's so crazy. It's so crazy. I remember we were sitting in the car, there was these two bunnies that were like playing in front of the car, very like carelessly playing in front of the car. And I remember looking at it very symbolically for some reason when that was taking place when we were, you know, smoking in my car. I remember just like looking at it for a second and kind of like observing how they played, and it reminded me of him and I, like growing up, just like innocently like playing and chasing each other around. And I don't know why it was so profound in that moment, but looking back on it, it was crazy because I remember just sitting there and like locking, you know, my eyes onto this like scene of these bunnies just like innocently playing and galloping around with each other. And it just reminded me of him and I, like growing up, and how our friendship had evolved up to that point. And I think it was kind of like a, you know, a sign or something symbolic to how things had kind of changed. Still my brother, and I still love him to death no matter what, but I could tell that the gap between him and I was starting to grow as far as what we were trying to do with our lives and where we kind of wanted to go, what we envisioned. You know, back in the day that was a lot more aligned, and really not even back in the day, like this was right when we graduated high school, which was basically a year up to that point. A lot had changed in that year from graduating high school till, you know, I came back after freshman year of university. And so it was a lot. And I remember just kind of like sitting with that, and it's tough because the rest of that summer I didn't really get to see him as much as I would have liked to. I really didn't get to see too many people. I was very busy with just working and trying to also maintain a long distance relationship. It was tough, you know, tough balance when you're trying to make as much as you can so you can have money to, you know, use in New York, and then also trying to maintain that relationship. It was a lot, and it was a crazy time where I was really just between those two. That was really my main focus. And so like my friendships, while I still like would see them and spend time with them from time to time, it wasn't as much, you know, more independent on my end, kind of just doing my own thing, making money, staying out the way. I didn't end up seeing him again until July 2nd. I remember that exact date because that was when we celebrated my one of my homies' birthdays together, you know. we celebrated at his cousin's house, and we were just, all there. We had all gotten together, and it was so nice because we hadn't really done that like that, that much, if at all, that summer, where we were all together. It was all of us. It wasn't just me and like Elijah. It was everybody. We were all together. And it was beautiful because we hadn't done that in a while. And it was tough because that night it was really almost like it almost felt like things kind of went back to normal with him. Like when I saw him, it's like I saw the version of him I remember him to be. Prior to the last time we had hung out, I remember just like being like, oh, maybe he was just like, I don't know. I remember at the party, I was like, the way he was there, I was like, oh yeah, this is my brother. Other time, maybe he's just going through some shit. He's just down, whatever, down and out, whatever. And I was like, I guess that's why I didn't think too much deeper about anything else, because for me, I was like, he just seemed like he was back to him. Like, little did I fucking know that a month later, I'd be getting a call and text saying that, he got shot and murdered. But, like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Because it was just so normal. It was just like how it was. I remember we were just all hanging out. And it was goofy. It was fun. And we had a good time. We chilled and we laughed and we just hung out. And, I remember I wore this hoodie. I'll never forget it. I remember I wore this hoodie. This specific hoodie that had like a certain type of hood on it. And I remember I put it up and he looked at me and he called me a wizard. That was just the type of stuff that with him, he was always just goofy, And that was a good night. And again, that was the last night. That was the last night I saw him alive. And part of me is really grateful for that because, and I am really grateful, I'll say, to have that be the last time I saw him alive, because it felt like the version of him I knew. The version of him that I grew up with, it felt like that was his send-off that night. Where we were all together. It was actually very beautiful that ended up being the last time I saw him alive. But obviously, fast forward to August 7th, because August 6th is when he officially passed away and was shot and killed outside of a liquor store. 25-hour liquor on Beach Daily in, I want to say it's in Inkster, but it's like very close. It borders Inkster and Dearborn. It's very close to Dearborn, but I'm pretty sure it's still in Inkster. Fast forward to, August 7th. I found out on August 7th officially because he passed at a later time on August 6th. So I was like already, I think, either asleep or I just wasn't in the loop, because I don't think anything even came out until the next morning. I don't think people started even finding out and posting about it and stuff like that until the next day, so the 7th, early in the morning. I was on the phone with my ex, and we had fell asleep on the phone together and woken up together like any other like day when we would just be on the phone all night and we fall asleep on the phone or whatever, doing long distance and stuff. I remember waking up and it was like a normal day, typical day. I think the day before that I was like, I had worked and I made music and stuff and got back home, and it was like a normal night. But it's crazy because I remember before he had died, he had called me. And I don't recall if it was that exact, like the night that he died, or if it was like the night before. It was literally like right around the time where he had passed away. I want to say it was the night of, but it could have been the night before. He had called me, and I think my ex and I were arguing at the moment or something, and we were like having a disagreement, and I didn't pick up because I just wasn't in a good headspace. I wasn't in the mood to like talk to anybody because her and I had obviously had our little tiff. So I didn't answer that call, and that that would have been the last time I would have ever heard his voice, other than when we last hung out at my friend's birthday. That would have been the last time I would have heard his voice, but I didn't pick up that call, and I didn't call him back either. And I had to, for a little while after he died, I really had to not kick myself for that. But looking back now and really reflecting on it now, it's stuff like that you never will know. You'll never be able to predict something like that. You'll never be able to predict that you're going to wake up on August 7th early in the morning and get texts from friends and family and people and see on Snapchat stories that your brother's dead. Like you'll never be able to predict shit like that. So like when I look back on it, I don't hold myself to it, because there's been plenty of times where in the past he's done the same thing. He's called me, I probably didn't pick up, or I called him, he didn't pick up, and it's just like, oh, he might be busy, someone's doing this, doing that, whatever. Didn't think too much about it. Again, because with him too, it's always been the mindset of like, I'm gonna see you, I know I'm gonna see you, I don't know when I'm gonna see you, but I'm gonna see you. So we didn't think too much about it. But looking back, wish I would have picked up that phone. It shows how quick things can change and how quick things can just flip in an instant, right? Things can change so fast in life. You never truly know when the last time you're gonna talk to somebody is. Something I've kind of learned from that experience especially. But anyways, August 7th, waking up on the phone. I look at my phone and I see that I had texts from one of my cousins and a close friend of mine. They both reached out to me personally and said that how sorry they were, and that they were so sorry, and that Elijah's dead and that he died. And when I read those, it's like, what? You don't register, like when you're reading something like that, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't register that's what's actually occurred, because it's like, what makes me want to believe something like that at age 19, that my brother, who I've known since I was literally 5 or 6 years old, just got murdered and killed outside of a liquor store. Like, you're telling, like, that doesn't even make sense, right? In my head then, didn't even make sense. So at first, it was denial. It was just pure denial. Like, I remember telling my ex-girlfriend at the time, I was like, I told her, and part of me started to panic a little bit and like freak out a little bit, because I was so shocked, and I was just like, wait, what? What do you mean? I'm like, if there's two people who I, love and was close to at one point telling me this, they're not bullshitting me, right? And these are two people who weren't even like mutually like friends or not connected in any way. It's two different parties telling me this. So I'm like, I go to Snapchat. I remember I just go to Snapchat just because a lot of the times when people have passed on, first thing people want to go do is post about it, right? Unfortunately. People want to go post about it. So I remember going and checking Snapchat and seeing if people had posted on Snapchat about it. Sure enough, all I saw, story after story after story, R.I.P. Elijah, R.I.P. E, long live E. All this stuff about Elijah dying. And that's when it hit, because ain't no way, not only these two people who I, grew up with texting me this, also people who I don't even know or talk to are posting this stuff. I know it's real. And that's when it all crumbled. It all crumbled from there. Everything that I ever knew, that I ever thought I knew at least, it all I died that day with my brother. I died that day. When he died, I died. And that had to be one of the most heart shattering, mind altering days of my entire existence. Because what do you mean, this person who's been in my life as long as I can really remember, my earliest memories, you're in them, you're involved in them, and you're telling me that you are dead, you got shot, you got murdered? What? I went insane, to say the least. Like, everything just didn't matter at that point. Everything just didn't matter. I went crazy. I went absolutely crazy. And I remember just screaming and pleading and yelling at to my ex, and being like, no, 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 no. Just no. Like, just please don't let this be true. Just please don't let this be true. I just remember how panicked I was. How that type of news, when it hits you, bro, and you really actually are aware that this is probably true, I'll never forget that feeling. That chaos that ensues from that. The mind just, it completely shatters. And that's what happened. And it shattered. My mind shattered. And I remember just complete mania from that point on. Just complete and utter mania. I'm gonna make a part 2 to this and touch base on the aftermath.